Hello Primary 5. Let's continue Concept 1 and move to Lesson 3. In this lesson we are going to talk about water, the different water ecosystems or the different ecosystems in the water, even it's a fresh water ecosystem or salt water ecosystem. We know that the water ecosystems or the ecosystems that we can find in the water is called aquatic ecosystems. They are called aquatic ecosystems, and we have, or we can classify the different ecosystems on the earth or water ecosystems on the earth into two types: salty water ecosystems and freshwater ecosystems. Let's start with the saltwater ecosystems. In these ecosystems we can divide them into two parts: the salty water in the ocean or of the ocean and seas, and the salt water of the lakes. Salt water of ocean and seas include two parts or two areas. Number one is called shallow areas. Shallow, it's the water in the outside like this, or the outside part of the sea and the ocean. These areas or these shallow areas contain two parts: the coral reefs and the intertidal zones. Intertidal zones. So we can find the intertidal zone in the shallow areas. The intertidal zone, it's the area outside like this. It's the area along the coast, and it disappears under the water at the high tide, then appears at low tide. So if there is a high tide, we cannot see this area, it's covered with water. If there is a low tide or at low tide, we can see this area. Area number two in the seas and ocean, when we go deeply, we can find the deep areas, and these areas are called also the abyssal zones, which are very deep areas like this. In the ocean we can where we can go with boats and ships. This area in the ocean contain the sunlight cannot reach to these areas, so they are called the deep area, and we cannot find any plants in the deep areas of the ocean and seas because the sunlight cannot reach them. Number two, the saltwater lakes. We have Lake Assal. It's a saltwater lake or a lake that contains salt water. We can find it in Djibouti. It has a very high amount of natural salts, as we see in this picture. So it's too salty. So most of aquatic animals cannot live there because of the high amount of salt, and also there are few plants that can grow or can live in this area. But there are many different types of bacteria that live in this lake. Let's move to the saltwater lakes or get some examples of the saltwater lakes that we can find in Egypt. We have Lake Manzala, Lake Mariout, Bardawil, and Etko. They are four saltwater lakes found in Egypt. Now let's talk about the freshwater ecosystems. We have ponds and lakes and the flowing water bodies. Ponds and lakes, they are still water bodies, or the water bodies that they are stopping or cannot move. But we have the flowing water bodies, they are the moving water bodies, and they include rivers and streams. A stream, it's a small water body, and inside it the water can move, it's like the river. So it can move. And we have many different plants and animals that live in the flowing water body. As example, on ponds and lakes, we have Lake Nasser, Lake of Wadi Rayyan, and Lake Qarun. They are freshwater lakes. And in many ponds and lakes, water is present all the year, but sometimes some ponds and lakes dry up in the very hot summer months. So the plants and animals in this place will adapt this dryness of the water. And here we have a comparison between some characters of different aquatic systems. Let's compare between ponds, streams, and oceans. Ponds, they contain fresh water, but streams, they also contain fresh water. And we said the streams, they are small rivers. The oceans, they contain salt water. the movement of water in the three ecosystems. In the ponds, they contain still water or stopping water. The streams, they contain running water. Oceans, the water moves in the ocean in the form of waves. And now let's compare between some different animals and plants that can live in the different systems. In the ponds, we can find water lilies, some insects, some worms, the salamanders and the frogs. They live in the ponds. But in the streams, we can find some mosses, and they looks like the algae, the catfish, crayfish, and the trout, and it's a type of fish also. In the oceans, we can find the kelp, dolphin, starfish, mosses fish, or flounder fish. It's a type of fish that is stuck the blood from other living organisms. And as we said here, the water of ocean, or the movement of water in the ocean, water moves in the form of waves, and that's because of the wind and the ocean currents. So all ocean's water in the world, they circulate around the world in a pattern or a fixed pattern called ocean currents, and the directions of ocean currents around the world can be predicted, or we can predict them. Here in lesson 4, we are going to talk about only 2 points. One of them is a revising on the first term. Firstly, we are going to know that a new type of scientists, the scientist who study the water, is called hydrologist. And the hydrologist, or their function, is to study the interaction between water in the hydrosphere and other spheres on the earth, like the interaction between the water or hydrosphere and geosphere, interaction between hydrosphere and the biosphere, then the interaction between hydrosphere and atmosphere. After that, the microplastics. It's a hint from the first term, or a part that we have to review from the first term. We know that the microplastics, they are plastic pieces whose length less than 5 millimeters. They are found in the aquatic ecosystems due to the breaking down of large plastic pieces. And we know that the microplastics, they harm the aquatic living organisms. So some animals in the sea cannot differentiate between their real food and the plastic under the water. And for some scientists in India, they wanted to learn more about the plastic wastes, so they took samples of the polluted water and soil of a river. Then they analyzed these samples. After that, they found out that most of these microplastics were made from or come from the decayed plastic bags, packing materials, and fishing lines. Let's move to the questions. In worksheet 4, put right or wrong. Microplastics are large plastic pieces which can harm oceans and aquatic life. Yeah, that's wrong. Very good, because they are not large plastic pieces. They are very small plastic pieces. Number 2, some aquatic organisms cannot differentiate between their real food and the plastic waste. Right. Number 3, microplastics can be found in water as well as in the soil. Right. So as we said, the Indian scientists, they got samples from the soil and water, and they found out that the soil also contains microplastic. Number 4, throwing plastic waste materials in rivers and seas never affect the life of aquatic organisms. That's wrong. It affects on the life of aquatic organisms. That's all for this part, and thank you for listening.